In the name of Christ, Amen. Please be seated. So in our gospel we hear, it's kind of like listening in on a conversation. They're talking about the beauty of the temple. And of course Jesus says, nice, but it's going to fall down. It's going to be torn to pieces. And of course they want the inside track on this. This is really the center of their religious and cultural life. This is where God lives. This is where the tabernacle is. The Ark of the Covenant. They want the inside track. And so he says that, well, first there's going to be wars and insurrections and natural disasters. That could describe every day since then. If he was really talking about the end of the world, and I'm not sure that that's the case, certainly it was an apocalyptic age when there was a lot of thought about the end of the world. And the truth of the matter is that Luke, in writing this story, was probably looking back through the reality of the destruction of the temple in 70 AD by the Romans, since the gospel was written after that took place. But there's just always that thread running through the big meta conversation about things holy. The end of the world somebody always seems to be talking about it. When I was a little kid, I got a crystal set for Christmas one year. That seems like it must have been somewhere right after the flood. The little crystal set, required no power, and I had a headphone, and I would lay in my bed at night, and I would listen to the radio. And this is in South Texas, and occasionally I could get WLS in Chicago. And I would listen at times just out of utter awe to Garner Ted Armstrong and the World Tomorrow. And he was convinced that the end of the world was at hand, and he could point to all these things in the book of Revelation and talk about how that was the Red Chinese and the Soviet Union and this and that, and just convinced. Well, guess what? It didn't happen. And then there were all of those since then who have been saying, it's the end of the world. You've got the establishment of the state of Israel is the surest sign that the end is here. Well, that hasn't happened. And this is not, that's just 20th and 21st century stuff. It's people have been predicting the end of the world as long as there's been the world with people in it, I would imagine. And I think that there is something in our psychic DNA that is conscious of the our doom, with quotes around it, is sure. Even, I don't know how often I say this, in the 25 years I've been preaching, but one of the greatest philosophers on this is Hank Williams. When he sang, "You'll never get out of this world alive." It's true that we are each of us is in our own end times. We are all in our own end times. From the moment that we are born into this world, we are in our end times. Because the fact of the matter is that the mortality rate is 100%. Everything, everyone, every person that has ever been born has or will die. And we can flip out and call it the end of the world as we know it. Or we can realize such is the nature of a human or any other kind of birth. It is as natural as the birthing. It's part of the package. We all face mortality. Now, what do we do with that fact? That's much more important. What we do with that. How does it destroy us? Do we just eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die? Do we become dark and cynical? Do we just lay down? Or do we let that fact establish in us a sense of the preciousness of whatever time we may have, so that in the context of that preciousness, the incredible value, that we do not waste it. We do not just let it slip away. We don't sleepwalk through it. We let it make us wake up. The fact of the matter is, the end of the world as we know it would not necessarily be a bad thing. When we look at the world in the context of the language used by the writers of the New Testament, the world isn't the created entity, the created organism that is our world. The world is the ego-driven systems of oppression that we have inflicted on one another since people started fighting over hunting rights in the Pleistocene. The ways in which we inflict oppression, even on ourselves, those closest to it, those that are closest to us are often the recipients of most of our oppression. That old, we always hurt the ones we love. And what is it that we do with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that are part of that life with its limits? If we don't acknowledge the fact that being alive means that there will be suffering, there will be pain. It may be physical pain, it may be psychic or spiritual pain, emotional pain. If you do not believe that life has pain, you are not paying attention. It's just part of the package. Now, we do an awful lot to try to mitigate against that pain. All of our addictions are methods that we use to try to deal with that pain. whether we eat it or drug it or drink it or shop it, gamble it, sex it. We all are trying to avoid pain. But what if we acknowledged it as the way of the cross and saw it as a path to new life, to a transformed life, a resurrected life, that out of the ashes of the pain and the sorrow and the mortality, that we see that not as a weapon or a club meant to beat us down, but an opportunity. Since we can't avoid it, what if we turned it to our advantage? What if we acknowledged it and dealt with it in ways that actually feed our souls, strengthen our psyches, and to whatever degree, our bodies? The first time I heard someone tell me that terminal cancer was the best thing that ever happened to them, I thought that the person was losing their mind. This individual was dead in 3 weeks from that point, had suffered amazingly, and said that for the first time in the 70-odd years that he had been alive, he felt alive and awake and powerful. That he could actually feel and was not afraid of loving and was not afraid of his body, even though it was killing him, so to speak. But that's happened several times since then, that people have told me. What is it that we can do in our life with our circumstance to take hold of that circumstance and let it be the means of following that path laid out by Jesus? The way of the cross is the way of life, because it can wake us up into a new life. New life. When I was the interim at St. Philip the Deacon in Portland, I discovered someone that I was amazed that I'd heard the name before of Howard Thurman, but I'd never read any of his writings. But while I was there, I delved into it a bit, and there's this wonderful quote that comes from his book, Disciplines of the Spirit. And he's talking about those who have come through times of difficulty. And he says, into their faces come a subtle radiance and a settled serenity. Into their relationships, a vital generosity that opens the sealed doors of the heart in all who are encountered along the way. This is the possibilities available, even in the worst of times, to make the worst of times the best of times. Not by an avoidance of pain, but an acknowledgement that life comes with a certain amount of suffering. And then our our physical life will in fact come to an end, and we should not waste the time simply complaining. The way of the cross is the way of new possibilities, awakening, and new life. New life that is, in fact, the resurrection.